Good morning, everybody. It is Kim. I am out in the garden because I, once again, am doing the no spend or very little spend pantry challenge because I still do not have my car back. And when they called me, it should hopefully be back later this afternoon. It was $650, which I only had $370 saved. So I have to make a few tweaks in my budget to get it up where I can afford to get my car back. So I'm out here in the garden looking for little things I can use because I have two dishes I think I'm going to make. And I just thought I'd show you some of the things I have left. I have a little bit of broccoli here and there. I have some carrots. I do have beets. I don't like beets, but I love the beet tops, so I can use those. And that's about it for this one. Now this little one had my tomatoes in there. I just cleaned them out yesterday. Took all the extra tomatoes, put them in a box. They were just starting to not look too healthy. I have this pepper plant. Now it's 80 degrees here in Michigan in the beginning of October, which is crazy, but I love it. So I'm going to try to keep this guy. I have no peppers from it this year yet. I have no idea what has been eating the leaves. I have looked for bugs and I just simply can't find anything. I have been having some issues with slugs this year, but I wouldn't think they would get up this high. Anyway, I know there is at least one, here it is, one tiny little pepper there. I was hoping to let them go for a little bit. This is that miniature corn. It's supposed to be like the little corn that you eat in Chinese quote unquote meals. Now, this was the first year I planted it. I got lots of ears. Unfortunately, I picked it too late, so the cobs are like corn on the cob, too hard. I let it go to seed for two reasons. I'm going to save some for next year. I know to harvest it much sooner. And the rest I could feed to my chickens through the winter. It's not a ton, but it was a good experiment. My beans I have let go to seed because I'm going to save those. And here is my herbs. This is garlic chives here. I see I have a few little onions left in there. What I did in the spring was I had a couple of onions that sprouted. And I stuck them out here. As soon as they went to seed, I cut off the seed heads, and they actually put out little onion bulbs in a couple of spots. So I have some onions I can use. We've had a lot of rain, and it's awful dry in here, but it is what it is. I have some chives, there's sage, and some thyme here that I can harvest. And this bed over here, I'm really upset because yesterday my chickens broke in, a couple of them, and I had some lettuce started here, and you could see it's gone. I picked a couple leaves off of that. I grew lots of kale because my bunny absolutely loves kale, and it lasts pretty much through the winter. Even when it's frozen, I can come out here, pick it, and it's fine. There's some more fresh kale there. Calendula flowers because I use that to make a healing salve for the winter. I tried to redo some peas. They were doing well until the chickens got in here. I do have a little bit of spinach, which again, I cannot find what is eating them. There are no bugs, but I've got these weird little holes. Now, maybe it was my chickens, but I don't think so because of the randomness of the way the holes are. Anyway, I come out and I do pick them. I just cut off the parts that aren't good. I see I have a potato that re-sprouted. I doubt I'll get anything this year, but I'll leave that over the winter. This is my makeshift little hoop house or greenhouse, whatever you want to call it. And there's some extra spinach coming up. If it wasn't 80, I would have the plastic over this already because that will keep the chickens out. But I'm hoping that it'll get big enough to at least get something off of it. And there's another pot of kale over there. So that's what I have left in the garden, and I have been getting a late bit of raspberries here and there. Hopefully you could see it. So I'm going to come and pick through some of these raspberries I'm going to try to use up as much as I can in here. So anyway, let's see what I can harvest. Oh, I almost forgot. I must have dropped some seeds early in the spring because I also have some turnips that showed up out of nowhere. Now I think these are field turnips, but they're edible. My bunny, again, she loves the greens. You can eat the greens yourself. And there's some turnips here. So I'm going to let those go. There you go, you can get a better view. You see something's been out here in the garden. Well, I'm going to get to work harvesting some of this stuff. See, I got 3 really big carrots. I still have a lot more carrots out there. I was able to pick up a few 2 little tiny pieces of spinach, but I'll use that. This is thyme. Don't you wish you could get more thyme? Just grow it outside. Some broccoli pieces. This is the kale. I have some nasturtium leaves here. 2 onions that were growing out there. This is some beet greens. This was harvested previously, some garlic. And I have that box of tomatoes. Last night I peeled and chopped, squished I should say, my tomatoes. And I saved the extra juice to use in other recipes. And of course in my sink right now I have the chives and the garlic chives. In my freezer I have some peppers, some green beans, and a few pea pods left. You know, the snap peas. So those are what I'm going to use today. Get started on just getting these all prepared, chopped up, whatever. And I'll come back and we'll start our first recipe. Right, let me show you the ingredients to this first recipe. And maybe you can guess what it is. Maybe you've eaten it before, maybe not. Now remember, I use recipes as a guideline. I switch them up to my taste, to what I have, and you can do the same. So I'm going to tell you what normally goes in it and then a couple of changes I made. So first I have the chopped diced tomatoes. I have some onion. It's supposed to be a bell pepper. I think these are a banana pepper, so they're a little bit spicy, which some people like the spice in this particular dish. You could use jalapenos if you wanted. I'm not going to use a lot because I really don't care for spicy. I have a little bit of chopped up ginger, and this is an addition I'm making. It's not usually in this dish. It's some shredded carrot because I have it. I have a couple of eggs, some paprika, salt and pepper, and some chili powder. Okay, now the nice thing about this particular recipe is if I didn't have onion, I could use something like this. These are those dried minced onions. I could use onion powder if I didn't have onion, and I could even use garlic powder. The one thing I do not have, which this recipe calls for, is some cumin. I'm out of that. Cilantro I do not eat because it makes my food taste like soap. And some parsley, fresh. You want fresh cilantro, fresh parsley. So I'm doing with what I have. And instead of the fresh cilantro and parsley, I'm going to chop up some carrot tops. Yes, you can eat those. There's a lot of things you can eat that people throw away. So let me get over to the stove and I'm going to start sauteing some onion and those peppers. All right, I have my pan heating up on a medium heat. I did forget one item. Now this is optional. I have avocado oil. You can use olive oil. I have my heat on medium because I don't want to burn anything. That's way too much onion for this recipe. Normally the recipe calls for, it makes a lot bigger portion. It calls for 1 medium chopped onion. So I'm just going to put what I think I'm going to like because this is only for me. The guys won't eat this. Got too many vegetables for them, I guess. And then I'm going to add in some of the peppers. I really would like these chopped a little better, but that's okay. I don't want too many. The recipe normally calls for 1 bell pepper. Okay, and I did forget to tell you the name of this, just so you know. It's called shakshuka, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's typically found, now you're probably not going to hear me, typically found, originated in North Africa and the Middle East. It's a tomato-based dish with eggs, and they eat it a lot for breakfast. Well, I'm not a big breakfast eater, so this is actually going to be my lunch today. Okay, so I'm going to saute these up to get them soft, because the rest of the recipe I'm going to simmer for a little bit to let all of the flavors come together here. Remember, don't put your garlic in too early. If garlic burns, it gets really bitter. So I do not add that yet, although I do like it a little bit sauteed. So once the onions turn translucent, then I will add the garlic for just a minute before I add in my tomatoes and carrots. I think I'm going to add the carrots too, because I want those sauteed just a little bit. Now, carrots are not normal in this dish. Like I said, I use recipes as a guideline. I switch them up for my taste and what I have around the house. My onion and the peppers I'm going to use. I'm going to add in my little bit of carrot. I figured, you know, anytime you could add some extra nutrition, it's not a bad thing. And my garden is not giving me salads now, so I try to eat a heavy vegetable base for lunch. Normally I have a big salad, and I am going to turn this down just a little bit now. That's kind of a medium-high. This pan has a rather thin bottom, so it heats up real fast. And now I'm just going to add some of that garlic, because that's a lot of garlic I chopped up. The recipe originally calls for 4 cloves, and I'm probably quartering this anyway. All right, so there goes my garlic in there, just to get a little bit of some browning on it. And it goes, once you get all your ingredients, it goes together pretty well. Now I'm going to use some of my tomatoes, because I might save some for my other recipe. It's going to depend on how many is in this pan. I'm going to use a little over half. And I'm going to let those start cooking really well. Seems like my pan is still hot. Turn that down even more. Let me get that stirred together, because I want to add my spices so that it can start. That should be enough tomato once it starts cooking out. All right. Recipe calls for the full recipe, 2 teaspoons of paprika. So I'm just going to give it, I do paprika to taste. I'm going to give it a pretty good sprinkle there. It calls for a half a teaspoon of cumin and a half a teaspoon of chili powder. So I don't want it spicy. I'm just going to do a good generous pinch of chili powder. Sorry, my parrot in the other room is mad because I'm not with her. Normally you would add cumin. Like I said, some people like it real spicy. They add hot peppers, jalapenos, whatever. That's up to you. For right now, I'm just going to simmer this for a little bit, let all these flavors really come together before I finish up this dish. Like I said, it goes together really quick. The next step is quite easy, and that's going to be using my eggs. Now, if you have a little bit smaller frying pan, it would probably work a little bit better. This one's a little bit wide, but I definitely do not want more than this. I'm going to make 2 shallow wells in here. Now the recipe called for 6 to 8 eggs. Obviously I'm not using that much because it's only myself. And normally you would want a little bit covering the bottom. So I'm probably going to have to play with this a little bit and bring in my tomatoes a bit to get this to work. But you know what? That's the fun of recipes. You make it work. You find a way to make it work. All right, so I'm going to make my 2 little wells. I crack my eggs in a separate bowl. I have been finding eggs in weird places, and I want to make sure that nothing's going on with my eggs. These are fresh eggs from the chickens this morning. I'm just going to drop, and I may have to make that well a little bigger, my egg into my well there. And I'm going to poach these eggs very gently and very slowly until they're done. For me, this was a no-cost meal today because it either came from my chickens or from the garden. So I'm going to put the lid on this and I'm going to gently let those poach. I like the yolks a little bit runny, as my grandkids call them, dipping eggs, because they like the runny yolks. And I'm going to cover this until the eggs are cooked, the whites are cooked thoroughly. All right, let's see where we're at. Doesn't that look beautiful? To finish it off, I'm just going to, instead of parsley and cilantro, I'm going to sprinkle some of those fresh carrot tops. It just adds that little pop of brightness to it. Because I have them, I'm going to add a couple pieces of nasturtium, which gives it that peppery taste, right? These are pretty big clumps, so I'm going to break those up. And just, again, because I have them, some of those fresh chives. And I think it really makes it a pretty dish. I'm going to serve that with a couple pieces of toast. And that is my lunch. All right, the next recipe is simple. It's a basic vegetable soup, what I call a starter, because I can change it up when I decide to eat it. And it really can use up the smallest bits and pieces of vegetables that you have, and it can turn into a really good meal. So in this pan, I have onions, some peppers, and some carrots with a little bit of the avocado oil, and I'm just going to saute those lightly. All right, while those are sauteing, I'm going to work with my broccoli. I chose the best little pieces I was able to get out of the garden, and I'm going to save some of this for my dinner tonight to use as a side dish. So I'm going to cut those off. That's a nice portion for me. The boys won't eat it anyway. A lot of people would throw this away. Don't do that. It's all, this is very tender because they're very small. When you have thicker pieces like this, they still have that great broccoli taste. I tend to like these better than the tops myself. Just take a vegetable peeler, peel off that outer portion that's a little bit woody, and then chop up the inside, and you have broccoli pieces. What do you think they do in that frozen broccoli pieces? They give you the stems, a lot of stems. And then you get a little bit of the flower heads, right? So here, I can use this in my soup. I love to dip it in, ranch dressing or whatever. And there, a nice big piece of broccoli that most people throw away. So let me go stir those, and I'm going to chop these up before I figure out what else I need to add to this. All right, so I sauteed those for just a little bit. Now I have that leftover tomato juice. It's just what I strained off of those tomatoes because they had quite a bit of liquid in them. And I got rid of the seeds in them. So that's going to be my basic soup base. I can add other things. And I have those little bit of tomatoes that I saved from previous. So those are getting used up. I'm going to throw in, just for right now, just because I like the flavor, a couple of beef bouillon cubes. You know what? Keep bouillon cubes on hand, because if you do not have any stock or, soup base, it works really good. I'm just going to toss in 2 for now because I can adjust the flavor later. So that takes care of that. Now, a couple other things that I have here besides the broccoli. Remember, I have those beet greens. I have some kale. I'm going to add a sprig of my thyme because I want to be able to pull this out of my soup later. So I'm going to add my thyme and let that cook. Can always add more later. The softer stuff like kale and the greens, I like to add later. It's just my personal preference because I don't like them totally mushy. And I'm just going to add some extra water because I want a little bit bigger broth made to it. Again, I'm going to add in some garlic, and I have the onions and the peppers already in here. This is a great time. If you don't garden, talk to friends and neighbors that do. Tell them that you would like to just come and see their garden. Maybe offer to help them clean it up for the fall and take home whatever you can find there and make yourself something that you can eat. I have done that for years. I have a friend in town. I helped him clean out, and I got some last year. I got peppers, and he had a lot of tomatoes. What else did he have? Oh my goodness. I walked out with a lot of squash that he didn't want anymore, especially summer squash. He was tired of it. And, you know, it just helps. Like I said, I'm trying to incorporate a lot of vegetables in my diet, and that really, really makes a difference. Other things I wanted to mention to you, let's go back over here where I have my little cutting board here, is, let me move that out of the way, these carrot tops. Don't throw them away, you guys. If the only thing you do is pull the leaves off, you could toss them onto like a rack or something. If you do not have a dehydrator, toss them onto a rack, let them dry out, throw them in a jar in your pantry. They add a lot of nutrition to your food. You can use them like parsley. You can add them to soups and stews. You're going to get some extra vitamins and nutrition out of these, okay? So I do dehydrate these so that I can save them for most of the winter. Well, obviously not ones that are wilty, but you know what I mean, okay? These nice fresh ones. The other thing too, now you've seen it everywhere, regrow your vegetable scraps. You don't actually regrow a carrot when you do that. But if you take maybe some marbles or some little glass rocks or whatever, and put the water level so it just skims the bottom of these carrots, you can grow those carrot tops to use during the winter. So don't think you have no way to make extra food. You could reuse these. These are nice and fresh out of the garden, so they should grow really well. The other thing too is, now on these beets, this stem I purposely kept. I might add a couple to my soup, but I like the greens a lot. I save these, I chop them up into little pieces once again, throw them in the dehydrator. I can add them to pasta sauce or whatever I'm making that I could sneak them in and the guys don't know. I could even powder them if I want to, so that, again, I'm adding a little bit of nutrition to our food. So anyway, I'm going to work on my soup a little bit. This is a great time to add, I am going to add some of those carrot tops. I have the carrot tops here. I have some of that nasturtium, and I have some chives. I will add some more fresh at the end, but I want this to cook in. I believe I have some bay leaves in my pantry, which I will pull out and add. And I'm going to add a little bit more water to this. I could add a little bit of salt. I always salt again later because I put those bouillon cubes in there. I may want more bouillon flavor later, so I don't want to add too much salt. I'm going to add my fresh cracked pepper. I did throw some garlic in there earlier, which I forgot to show you. That was with all of the other stuff. And now's a good time to adjust it to your taste. If you like it Italian flavored, add some basil and some oregano. And, I already have the thyme in there. You could, again, spice it up with some taco seasoning, chili powder, cumin, whatever you like. So this soup is a use it up, just what you have. Now, if I had cabbage, I would add cabbage. If you don't like cabbage, don't add cabbage. Add what you like. Oh, I forgot about one thing that I did get. I stuck it in the fridge. Right, I was really worried that this turnip was going to be really woody inside, and I don't think it's too bad. I'm not going to use the whole thing because that would just be a lot in that soup, but something started to get to it. These were volunteers. I don't know, maybe the squirrels moved my seeds. I had some early in the spring and I didn't realize. I'm just going to take this part off. You can use these similar to potatoes, in your soup. But I'm going to taste a little piece just to make sure it's not too woody. It's perfect. Oh, it's really perfect. So I'm going to add some of this turnip to my soup. I also have those green beans and those pea pods in my freezer. So this is going to be a really dense vegetable soup. All right, you guys, you are not going to believe this. This is not a turnip. This is the biggest radish I have ever grown in my life. I took a bite of it and I'm like, wait a minute, that's spicy. That is not a turnip. And I realized that some of my radishes had gone to seed. That's where these came from. The seeds, I had pulled out some of it and tossed it on the ground. So we have majorly huge radishes out there. I can't believe I did this. And it's not just good for me. My parrots, radishes are very good for them. So I'm going to chop this one up and toss some of that in the freezer. Label it, of course, because if I don't, I always forget. So that I can put it in my parrot food the next big batch that I make. Ha, that's funny. All right, I wanted to show you my finished vegetable soup. I tasted it and it is really good. I have all those oddball vegetables in here. I have some green beans and some snap peas I had in the freezer. Those beet greens, the kale, onion, broccoli stems, all that kind of stuff is in here. And this is going to make either a great soup or I can turn it into a meal. I'm going to put it away like this in a couple containers because for dinner tomorrow, I'm not going to have it tonight because I already had a heavy tomato-based lunch. I have leftover rice in the refrigerator. If I wanted, I could add some cooked lentils to this soup. It would be a full meal then. I have, if the boys don't eat it tonight, I have a leftover pork chop I could chop up, add that with some rice to some of the soup. I could add an egg in it and just let it go through the broth like an egg drop soup. So there's a lot of ways I can use this. Things that normally people bypass, look away from. I call it scrap soup or, end of harvest soup, whatever you want to call it. It's just those bits and pieces that, like I said, broccoli stems and old kale and beet greens that nobody ever uses. And this really turned out delicious. So I hope you enjoyed my 2 little meals I made for you from scraps and bits and pieces from the garden. And give me a comment below. Let me know what you think about this. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful day.